Welcome to the Her Vibe is Pretty podcast, where you'll be guided on how to step up into your evolved woman,
design your dream life, and start living it. Let's get vibey. Hey, welcome back to this week's episode of the Her Vibe is Pretty podcast. Sarah and I have a very interesting topic to dive into today, but before we dive headfirst into that, Sarah, what are you feeling high vibe about?
I am feeling high vibe about three things, short and sweet. So first thing is that last weekend was my very first round of breathwork teacher training.
Yay!
You guys know I'm stoked about. I talk about it all the time on here. And it was amazing, so transformative. Seriously feel like a different person already. And we've only had 2 days of intensive training. So best is yet to come. I'm feeling so high vibe. It's Thursday now and that was last weekend. It's been like days and I'm still feeling really good about that. So that's one of the things.
That's huge. I'm so excited that you're on this journey and that you're learning so much more. I mean, you're already so knowledgeable about breath work, but you're like taking it to the next level. And I love that.
I know. I'm so excited about it. And there's already so many ideas coming through for like courses and bundles and all of the good things. I'm actually planning on combining my knowledge with like coaching and life lessons and wisdom and everything that I teach in my current course with breath work. It's going to be some really cool creation. So super stoked about that. I'm also feeling super high vibe because you guys know that I have a course called Diet Culture Dropout. And it's basically 12 weeks of the lessons and like wisdom and what's the word that I'm trying to think of? Like the embodiments, the top embodiments that I use to heal my relationship to food in my body. I basically took years and years and years of study, of experience myself with binge and emotional eating and condensed it into 12 weeks. And I have so many humans going through that course. And I just decided to do a monthly live Q&A with them, which I originally wasn't including in the course. I just threw that in. And we did our first one this morning. And it was just absolute gold, pure gold. So much came through, so much engagement. I just could feel the vibration of everybody on that call. Everyone's just so ready to heal and evolve into their highest self. So I'm running off that energy today too.
Love it.
Yeah. And then lastly, I'm going back to Florida this weekend. So I'm pumped.
Oh my God.
Oh, and I'm feeling high vibe about your baby shower.
Yes. Oh my gosh, me
That's
too.
this weekend too.
Girl, you've got so many because I thought you were going to say Christy's book.
Oh my God. Yeah, that too. Ugh.
So many things to be high vibe about right now.
Guys, Christy Whitman, we had her on. She dropped a book called The Desire Factor, and go to thedesirefactor.com. You can buy it, but it's so good. It finally dropped. So when we had her on, it wasn't available yet. We could pre-order it.
Yeah.
And we did, and now it's here and it's amazing. So go check it out.
Yeah. I'm dying to get into it because I'm reading a couple books. So I'm really trying to like get some of these ones that I've started finished before I start a new one. It's so hard for me to do that because I get really, really excited when I hear about a really good book. And you guys, Sarah was telling me how she like went on her walk the other day and was listening to it. And it totally transformed her mood and her vibe for the day. And it just makes me really excited to dive in myself.
So yeah, I'm feeling really freaking good today. Mary, what are you feeling high vibe about? Share with us.
So yeah, you want to know what I've been inspired by lately is I'm tapping back into creation mode a little bit here. And that feels really, really good. So I'm proud of myself because I've given myself a lot of grace when it comes to this whole pregnancy thing. And like on days that I'm feeling very tired and just lower energy or my body's just feeling really achy, I'm giving myself so much space to rest and relax, which is, I'm very proud of myself because that's not always an easy thing to do.
Right.
But I have been feeling pretty good the last few days. And so I've used those days to create some more video content for my yoga app, creating some more tutorials online. I've been inspired to do, like, I did an Instagram live all by myself, which I
Proud.
don't usually do that. I'm usually on there with someone else. Um, and it's just really inspiring me to create some more content, and things like different things that aren't even yoga related are starting to come up. So people have been asking me about different pregnancy complications that I'm dealing with. So, like, for example, I have gestational diabetes, and you could see my little glucose reader that's like the patch on my arm in my post. And so I had like several DMs from people that were
Yeah.
like, how are you
Well,
managing
you
this? Like,
haven't talked about that, like, here
yeah,
or anywhere.
yeah, I've kind of kept it under the radar.
Yeah.
And I got more DMs than I thought. I kind of didn't think anyone would even notice it, but I got a few people that did and have been messaging me and, just asking like, oh my gosh, like, how are you handling that? Like, what's your diet like? What are you doing to manage it? And all these things. And like, what tips do you have? Because it's not only like, so just for anyone who's not aware, gestational diabetes is a form of diabetes that comes up through pregnancy. And it's like exclusive to that because it's a hormonal thing. And I'm not a doctor, so I'm not going to pretend to get all scientific about it. But basically, when you're pregnant, your body can produce a hormone that like kind of blocks or resists the insulin. So your body's not making insulin like it should be. And so you just have to like manage that. And there's a variety of ways to manage it. So anyways, yeah. So it's like people are asking me about that. I'm like, well, maybe I'll start making some content around that sort of thing. So I'm just feeling really inspired by creation again, which feels good because I took a little bit of a break from it and now I'm feeling inspired to dive back in. So
I love it. Yay.
yeah, and my baby shower is this weekend. So I'm excited for that too. It's going to be so much fun.
Okay,
But
so we're about to go from high vibe to a topic that's not low vibe, but Mary, why don't you introduce it? Because not finding words right now.
I'll introduce it because even though what we're going to talk about today can be a little bit scary, it can be a little uncomfortable to think about. I came across an article this week, I don't remember. I don't even know what day it is. But I recently came across this article that was about the 5 regrets of the dying. And I looked into it a little bit further and learned that this article was based on a book by Bronnie Ware called Regrets of the Dying. And I have not read this book, so I don't know much about the book itself, but basically this article just sort of pointed out some of the top regrets that people have on their deathbed. And again, I know that talking about mortality, talking about death can be very uncomfortable. We don't like to think about that sort of thing, even though it's very, very much a reality for every single one of us. We are humans, we do not live forever. And regardless of what you believe happens after we die, and that's a whole nother conversation. But I also believe, and I personally am a huge advocate for taking time to think about your own mortality
Mhm.
and realizing that we do have an end date. We will not live forever, and nor do we know when that moment's going to be.
Right.
So, knowing that and accepting that gives us like a lens to look at our life through.
Mhm.
How do we want to live this life? And obviously, we talk about this all the time in so many different ways. Um, but today, we thought it would be really interesting to start to dive in a little bit deeper to these top 5 regrets of the dying. I'm sure there's many, many others, but we'll dive into these, probably pretty common ones that people have and kind of share our opinions, our experiences, ways that you can try to avoid this so that, you don't end up on your deathbed thinking, oh, I wish I would have fill in the blank.
Right.
So I thought first it would just be interesting for us to talk a little bit about regrets in general.
Mhm.
Like, what are your feelings about that, Sarah? Like when I say like life regrets, like does anything come to mind for you or like what are you thinking?
Yeah, I mean, this entire topic has shifted massively for me ever since getting into spirituality, and like Mary said, it doesn't really matter what you believe happens next, but I'm going to share my experience with it. So I was raised I was raised Catholic. And when I was growing up, and I think too, part of the reason I'm sharing this is because it is really, I think that death is something that we all just kind of naturally avoid thinking
Right.
about. Like we don't ever think about it. And we just think it's like our human minds think it's not going to happen to us and it's not going to happen to anybody close. And it's like we don't even think about it until somebody gets sick or somebody gets in a tragic accident and then everything starts to like set in. But growing up, that's kind of the attitude I had. I never thought about it. I just thought it's not going to happen to me. It's not going to happen to anybody close to me. And I also didn't really, I was obviously taught, you die and go to heaven or hell. And I just didn't really get it. And I didn't feel like deep truths in my body around what happens next. There was no like certainty there. Then enter my spiritual journey when like shifted into spirituality and started learning about spirituality, and I read this book called The Journey of Souls. Highly recommend that book. It is so good. Basically, I'm not going to tell you guys what it's about, but basically reading that book made me very comfortable with the concept of dying. And even like at this point, and I know I'll be like this for the rest of my life, death used to be probably one of my biggest fears. It is not anymore at all.
I love
And
that. I
like,
need to read this book like ASAP.
yeah, I'm not afraid. I am not. If anything, like I don't want to die, but I'm excited to see what's next because I'm just gonna leave it here. Journey of Souls changed my life, and it's like obviously it's a book written by a guy who's a psychotherapist, and I think he hypnotizes people. I don't know what you call that, but he just reading these words, for me personally, I could feel the truth pulsating through my body. It's like my soul knew that like yeah, this is it. Like this is it. Like this is what is truth. So that's what I feel. So now I'm not I'm not afraid of dying. And I love talking about this topic in general because of what you just asked me. Like, what do you feel about regrets? I will say that I this is one thing that I'm still navigating because I do believe that everything's happening for us in perfect timing. And at like, because I could look back and be like, oh, I regret not doing this. I regret not doing that. I regret not taking that leap. I regret not doing this. However, you and I also both read that book. What's it called? The one by Matthew Haig or whatever.
Oh, The Midnight Library.
Yeah. And she had all these regrets. And then she got to go and like live out. She had this book of regrets when she was like between life and death. And you guys, this is like it's a fictional book, but there's
So
also
good though. It's like one of my all-time favorites.
yeah, she was able to like go back to all these things that she regretted and live them out. And she discovered that like all these awful things happened when she actually did that. So I do believe that everything's happening for us in perfect timing. And even though that book is fictional, I think that there's truth to it.
Yeah.
So with regrets, I personally I can't fully say that I don't have any regrets at all, but the regrets I do have, I'm really shifting, and I've shifted a lot with a lot of different regrets since getting into spirituality and studying all this stuff. I've shifted into a place of just pure acceptance, trusting that the things that I used to regret, and there are like a couple things I could think of that I'm still like, kind of regret that, but I'm shifting into a state of acceptance, trusting that it was happening for me in perfect timing. However, I also believe that Mary, you and I are here sitting here talking about this. And if you are listening to this right now, it is for a reason. It's happening for you in perfect timing. Your soul came into this body knowing that it was going to have the opportunity to live this lifetime to the absolute fullest. I personally believe in reincarnation of souls. I think and like once again, that's my belief, doesn't have to be yours. But after studying what I've studied, I believe that souls come into these bodies to evolve. Our soul is on a journey and it wants to learn lessons and it wants to have different experiences in different lifetimes. And so I don't think that every soul comes into these bodies like ready for what we're talking about in this podcast and what you guys are listening to right now. I think that like if you're a new soul, like I know some people who I'm like they're for sure a new soul. Think about it as like babies. Like babies are just trying to figure out the basics to survive. And I feel like that's the same with new souls. Like new souls come into bodies and they just try to figure out how to survive. They get a job, they work a 9 to 5, they put a roof over their head, they put food on their plate. Maybe they have a family and then that's it for them. But I think that whether you believe in reincarnation or not, your soul is part of the pretty vibe tribe for a reason. It chose to come in and live it up this lifetime and like not hold back. So that was a very long explanation to your question, but
I loved every second of it. I have like a million things to say, and some of them I think we're gonna dive in a little bit deeper because you touched on so many good things there. Once we dive into like the actual top 5 regrets,
Mhm.
the one thing that I want to add, sort of my take, is I don't know if this is good or bad. So I'm just kind of sharing my realistic opinion and take on regrets, but they're a huge motivator for me.
Yeah.
I, in a creepy way, probably expected. I feel like I have some creepy things about me. I think about death a lot, and not in this morbid way, but in this way of like, this is my life and I want to make the very most of it
Mhm.
in a way that feels very aligned. Like, I'm not one that's like, I need to go skydiving to like live my best life necessarily. Like some people are called to do that. That's not really a calling for me. But for me, it was like, I knew I didn't want to stay at the job I was stuck at. And I like had this calling that was like, you need to just go for it. You need to just go for it. But I'm scared, but I'm scared, but I'm scared. And then it was like, you don't want to regret never trying to go for it. And like that motivation, like I'm not sure if that's a good or a bad thing, but that motivation like helps me take action on some of these things that feel scary and feel like I don't know if it's going to work, or I don't know what people are going to think of me if I do this, or am I crazy for going for this sort of thing? But that calling and that draw is there.
Yeah.
And when that's there to me, I'm like, I will regret this if I don't try.
Mhm.
And there's probably so many more things I should have tried and didn't. But like you said, things happen in perfect timing. Like you could easily say, oh, I should have quit my job years ago, but I didn't because I needed to get to that place where I hit a wall and needed to go for it.
Right.
So regrets scare me. Like that is a very
Mhm.
deep fear of mine when I live my life, is that idea of I'm going to end up on my deathbed thinking, why didn't I do all of these things that I really wanted to do? Like
Yeah.
what was stopping me and why did I let those things stop me?
Mhm.
And then to be at a point where I'm not in a good position to go for it because I am dying, that's a huge fear of mine. And so I keep that, like I said, I think about mortality kind of a lot in that aspect of like, how do I want to live the life that I'm living?
Yeah.
How do I want to make it as full and expansive and fun and exciting as possible?
Yeah.
And to live up in the moments. We talk about like a little thing is like finding small ways to celebrate or like enjoying the little moments. Like that to me makes life so much richer, where I can honestly say, if I were to die, I wouldn't I wouldn't have regrets. Like again, I'm sure I could think of something that I regret, but I really intentionally try to live without any regrets. And if there are things that I'm feeling called to or feeling pulled to or want to do, I try so hard to figure out a way to make that happen
Mhm.
and make that a focus. And that's what we want for you guys too, ultimately, and there's not a right or wrong answer to what that life looks like. I think it's more about like tuning in to yourself and listening to those draws and listening to the things that are calling your name or calling your soul. But it's not being too afraid to not go for them.
Right.
So that's kind of where I'm at. I really like talking about this kind of stuff, but I'm also kind of a creep sometimes. So
Well, what I want to say to that is if you listening, if that rings true in your system too, when Mary was talking, if you're like, oh yeah, me too, it's a fear of having regrets, that's just the proof for your mind that that's why you're here. I mean, everything you just said is essentially what I was talking about. You just put it in a different way. Like your mind feels a connection to your soul, and that's the reason why you feel that or you think that fear of having regrets, because your soul knows that you're here to live it up and to live this lifetime to the absolute fullest. Whereas, like I mentioned, I know some people that I just don't think that they don't have that fear of having regrets. They're just like, well, life is what it is and it's just going to be what it is, and that's that for that lifetime, and that's okay. But if you're here listening, I truly believe that you are here to make the absolute most out of your life. And one thing that I reflected on too when you were speaking, and obviously you guys know that this is very near and dear to my heart because it's what I specialize in. It was one of the biggest struggles in my life. But there was once a point where I reflected on it and I'm like, damn, do I really want to spend the rest of my life struggling with emotional eating, binge eating, food in my body? Like, really? That's a long ass time. And
Mhm.
that was like one of my motivators for enrolling in a $12,000 program to overcome that, because I'm like, I don't want to be on my deathbed and look back and be like, holy shit, I struggled with this thing for my entire life, which obviously it was a pattern that kept me feeling really stuck and really small and very like unfulfilled, turning to food for everything. It wasn't fun. It wasn't a fun life. And so, yeah, like I love the way that you put that. Those things can be our motivators to like change or to create the most out of this lifetime.
I had a similar realization like that too, where I like stumbled across this article. I'll have to look and see if I can find it. And it was about the time that we spend in our life. And so that's another thing that I want to point out before we dive into these top regrets that people have when they're dying is the idea of renewable things in our life and non-renewable things. So for example, I think a lot of us, myself included at times for sure, can get really caught up in needing to make more money. And as you guys know, Sarah and I love money. We
Mhm.
love money. It is a beautiful resource,
And it
but
is there.
you can always make more money.
Mhm.
You can always make more money. You cannot make more time.
Yeah.
It does not matter how much money you have, you can't make more time for yourself. And I think a good example of this is Steve Jobs from Apple. One of the richest people in the world gets extremely sick and dies. He had all the money, all the resources, and he could not buy more time. He might have been able to extend it a little bit, but he wasn't able to extend it forever.
Mhm.
And so I think that's a good thing to think about. And so I read this article. So my realization around time and realizing like this is a resource that is not forever, you can't make more of it, where you kind of analyzed how you spent your time in a day.
Mhm.
And it was like a square, all these squares on a graph. And so for each, you would like color however many squares for how much time you spend at work, a certain color, how much time you spend commuting, a different color, how much time you spend doing things that you enjoy doing, your hobbies, spending time with your family, color those a different color, how much time you spend showering, eating, doing your basic human needs things. And you realize when you have now this visual of like, where's my time and energy going?
Mhm.
And I remember doing that again while I was working, knowing that I wanted to be doing something else for work.
Mhm.
And when I could visually see on a piece of paper how much time my life was spent working, commuting to and from work, it
Mhm.
was majority of my waking hours. Oh, sleep, because you have to put sleep on this thing because we sleep a third of our life.
Yeah.
So it was very eye-opening for me where I was like, I need, if I'm not happy with what I'm seeing here, I need to make a change.
Mhm. So the quote, I know what you're talking about. You can always make more money. You can never buy back time. I don't
Yeah.
know who said it, but I've heard that before too. Okay, I have like two comments to make and then let's dive in. So with that, the money thing, I think that's true, but also you can collapse time and you can also stop equivalating, like you can drop the story that you have to spend more time to make more money. And
That
once
is a limiting belief for
it's
sure.
such a limiting belief, and it's honestly, I actually had one of my coaches the other day say in a session I was in with her, she was like, you break out of the matrix. I don't know if you guys have ever seen the Matrix. I don't even know if she was referring to the movie, but it's like a really good and it's actually real. But she's like, you escape the matrix of this limiting belief, smaller self, subconscious ran mind. You break free when you can figure out quantum financial abundance, when you can figure out and finally like embody that more time doesn't equal more money. That's when you finally like break free of all the smaller self shit. And I'm like, damn, that's good. So
Yep.
that's what I believe in, that because I do think that money is an amplifier. And like one of just to put this in context, one of my regrets would be, if I didn't have these conversations now, would be not traveling a ton. Well, guess what I need to travel? Money, and lots of it, because traveling is not cheap unless you're doing it on a budget, which I don't want to do. So that's that. And so learn how to collapse time. And we can, I know that's like a really vague statement, but
Yeah, maybe we can dive deeper into that
listen
one.
to the Desire Factor. It'll help you understand that deeper, by Christy. It's really, really good for that kind of stuff. But we can go there a different day. And then to speak to the second part of that, when you were saying that you like observed how much time you spent doing what, that was another thing for me when I was talking about the binge and emotional eating, and I was like, damn, I don't want to do this my entire life. I also was like, too, I want to look back on life and be like, damn, I lived a great life just sitting there in front of my TV watching Netflix, living in other people's lives, living in movies, living in shows, like not even living my own life. No. Do I want to look back and be like, oh, so glad I spent all my time scrolling on Instagram and Facebook comparing myself? No. And
Right.
like that was 100% one of my motivators, to learn how to feel my feels and live my human experience and do the inner work, so that the human mind in me didn't feel the pull to always go to the food, to the social media, to the Netflix, because that just was not how I wanted to live my life. And so now here we are. God, this is so good. I feel like this in itself could just be an episode.
Seriously. Well, and I feel like too, so this will be interesting, like 50, 100 years from now, like what are the regrets of our generation going to be? And you're right. They're going to be different than these things that we're going to dive into. And we'll get, we'll get there in a second, you guys. But that idea of, yeah, am I going to look back and be like, I'm so glad that I compared myself to all these random strangers on social media? Fuck no. No one's going to be glad they did that
Right.
or wasted so much time just sitting mindlessly scrolling.
Yeah.
It's like that would be a good exercise even right now to just do and like take a moment, whether it's just like in a meditation or if you want to journal on it, but think back to the times in your life when you felt most alive, when you felt like you were living your best life. Like, what were those moments? What were you doing? Who were you with? How were you feeling? And then figure out ways that you can start to recreate that in your everyday life.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like that would be a really cool exercise for us all to do, because it's like we need to take that time to reflect and like see and figure out. Like, you're not going to maybe automatically know the answer, like this is what I should be doing instead.
Mm-hmm.
But if you're able to, you're going to live more intentionally if you have this idea of the direction you wanted to be headed. And then think too, I mean, we kind of touched about this in the last episode, but like what are the things that you're doing that you don't feel good doing? do less of that, do more of the things that make you feel good. That's actually exactly what the last episode was about.
It is. And it's also like we do want to acknowledge too, it's easier said than done, which is
Right.
why I have an entire 12-week course on it, which is why I've spent years figuring it out. The mind, there's so much internal chaos that actually really hinders us and makes it super hard to do. Because if it were easy, to just drop the things that were destructive and do all the things that make us feel alive, we'd all be doing it. Because what human doesn't want to thrive here? Kind of the same way I always talk about this when it comes to like being healthy and working out and whatnot. I just, there's a lot of BS. I'm trying to think of like a more professional word, but there's a lot of bullshit out there that these people are like, oh, you want to be healthy? Just do this diet and just do this workout program. Like, if it were that easy, everybody would be healthy and everybody would be in the bodies that feel thriving for them. It's not that easy. So
Right. No, it's
do the
such
inner
a
work, but that's why you're here. Like, that's why you guys are here listening to this podcast. That's why you guys are, with us and you're doing the work. So
hell yeah. All
yeah.
right, do you want to dive into these?
Yeah. Oh my gosh. Let's
Okay.
start to share them.
So the first one on this list is I wish I had the courage to live a life true to myself, not the life others expected of me.
So good. I mean, we talk about it all the time. The life that we usually live until we wake up to this stuff is from the subconscious. It's the part of us that was created from day 0 to 8 years old. It's not our truth. It's the truth of everybody who surrounded us during that time. And once you start to do this work, you get to start to dive into the truth of who you are. And then you get to start to embody the truth of who you are, which is the hard part. But
Mhm.
clearly, I mean, I could totally see why that's such a big regret.
I feel like what I think of immediately is all of the shoulds that come into our life,
Yeah.
whether it's the career you think you should be in, or the person you think you should marry, or the friends you think you should have, or the clothes you think you should wear, or the body you think you should have. It's like
Mhm.
we get so sucked into the opinions of others. With social media now, there's a lot of comparison because we're constantly seeing what other people are doing. We're watching their highlight reels and thinking like, they've got this magical life. Why don't I have this magical life? Like my life's not good enough. I should have what they have. Maybe if I buy all these things that they have, I'll be happy. I'll be living this life that they're living, but they're not taking the time to tune in and say like, no, what do I really want?
Mhm.
What am I really called to do? And even if you do that work, then taking that next step to do it,
Mhm.
because that's very scary in itself too. Like I said, I knew for a long time I needed to get into different work, but it was so hard. It was so scary.
Yeah.
I felt like I should stay in this job because I'm so good at it and I overall like what I do. Like I'm good at it. I like the people that I work with. It's a company that has a lot of values and beliefs that were very aligned with me. So there were a lot of good things, but there was this deep feeling of like this isn't quite right, but I
Mhm.
should be happy. I should be grateful for where I'm at and this salary and like all my benefits, and what if this fails and I don't know, and what are people going to think of me if I try to start my own business, and like am I even good enough to start a yoga business? Who's going to want to practice with me? There are so many other, I just let sometimes the mind take control for too long, where so it's like, again, you guys, that reminder that this stuff isn't just super easy to do. um but here we are. One of the biggest regrets is people not listening to that inner voice and taking action on the things that they felt called to and inspired to.
Yeah.
And I think a big one, and I briefly touched on this, is, life's work, your career. A lot of times you get that pressure from,
Mhm.
your family or from society. Like, you need to be this, you need to be making this much money. Like, this is what your life needs to look like if you want to be quote unquote successful, when really we should be deciding what success looks like for ourselves.
Great.
And it's going to be very different person to person because we are unique, we are one of a kind, and we don't always allow ourselves to flourish as our truest self. You know, we try to kind of blend in and do what society says is correct. So that's what comes to mind for me around this one.
To me, when just hearing that, something that came up for me, and I'm not saying this to like shame anybody, but this is just truth for me. When I think of success, like I think somebody who's, and it's all about perception. We all see things like so differently, but in stories, I see at this point in my life somebody who followed their dreams, who's, starting the business or whatever and failing, more successful than somebody who's sitting in their corporate job, miserable, making a steady paycheck, getting that steady income, but they hate their freaking lives. Like I see the one who's following their dreams and failing more successful than the ones who are just sitting there hating life and staying in the mundane thing because they quote unquote should, because that's what others think they should do.
Right. I agree. It's such a trap. The whole success and idea of what success is such a juicy topic in itself because there are so many different definitions of it. And
Yeah.
I will say, and maybe I am just really mindful of who I follow on social media, and I do see a shift in people shifting the conversation around what success is, and that it is this like inner peace and this happiness and this satisfaction with your life
Mhm.
as you are, as well as it's still okay to strive for more, but not the idea of like I'll be happy when
Right.
I get this or whatever. You fill in the blank again. So yeah, I think it's a very dynamic topic and it's one that is so important. So as you guys are thinking about that, again, give yourself that space to meditate on it, to journal on it, and think about like in what ways are you living your life for someone else? In what ways can you start to live your life for you
Yeah.
instead?
And not even just, and one more thing before we move on to the next, it's not even just with career. It's with, I was talking to one of my clients this morning about friendships, and this client was, it was actually in the diet culture dropout Q&A. He was talking about how he had a lot of guilt and shame around staying in and being with himself, which is what he desired, rather than going out with friends.
Ooh.
And yeah, and he felt guilty about bailing, and he felt shame, and he felt worried that they weren't going to like him and they were going to keep asking him to do things if he bailed like that. But that's like this plays a role there too. It's like you don't, it's not just with the career, it's with everything. At
Yeah.
that point, I mean, he did stay integral to the truth of what he desired and he followed through with that. It was hard and he's working through that, which is great. But him living life for others would have looked like forcing himself to go out and go socialize when he didn't want to. And that contributes. All these little teeny tiny things add up to that massive regret. So
Yep.
leave it for you. Okay, the next regret that people tend to have is, I wish I hadn't worked so hard.
I love this one so much.
Me too.
So
It's so common. Like there, and I'm like, you guys are gonna hate me for coming back to this because I'm not like giving you any more details on the how to, but I promise I will eventually. This is another one of those things where I'm like, learn how to collapse time and stop splitting time and money, and you can make a good living and you can be financially abundant and let money amplify your life and live out your fullest, wildest dreams, but not work super freaking hard. Because in
mm,
the Desire Factor by Christy Whitman, she says in there, in like hard work works, right? This is why I work hard. Like why if, and I'm just going back to, if we analyze why people work hard and why this regret is created in the first place, people work hard to make money and to quote unquote be successful. And Christy talks about how obviously that works. There's so much proof of it. Anybody can create a plan, work their asses off, work super hard, and succeed. Absolutely. It's not the only way. It is absolutely not the only way. There is another way. You do not have to work hard to put a roof over your head, food on your plate. And honestly, you don't have to work hard to live out your wildest freaking dreams. There's a time and a place to put in inspired action. But like I said, if you guys want even more detail on that, go get the Desire Factor and start there. or you are best at making money. That's a good one too. But I see it all the time, and I have really close people to me, family members, friends who they work their lives away and they work just on other people's schedules, and they work, and I can see the stress in their face, and I can see the depletion in their face, and I can see the unfulfillment in their face, and they're in the trap, and it's sad.
Yep. I have a lot to say about this one. So I'm going to try not to forget all the things I want to mention. There are, I think, again, as a society, it's like we need to make work this top priority. And I'm not saying don't make it a priority, but remember that it is one aspect of your entire life.
Mhm.
It's an important one, no doubt. Like
Mhm.
you need to work to create money, to like, we need money to live. Like there's no doubt around any of that.
Mhm.
But remember that you can always make more money and the work will always be there. Like things can wait. We think in our minds, like, this cannot wait. I need to do this right now. And that's usually not the case. And I'm kind of speaking back to when I was working and like, I used to work for a company that manufactured labels. And so we would, of course, get things that were like, okay, this is very time sensitive, needs to happen. But I think our brains would like turn everything into like this time sensitive thing
Mhm.
that felt like I need to do it all now. And then I feel bad if I don't. When in all reality, life would go on if I could just unplug at 5, come back in the next day, get
Yeah,
it done the next day.
it's so true.
And I mean, there are countless nights where my husband, Jake, will be working till 9, 10 p.m. Not straight. Like he'll come home, love dinner, whatever, but then he like has to get his computer out and he's like working at these late hours. And I'm like, are you serious, man? Like this cannot wait until tomorrow. And it's hard. It's hard to balance that. And it's something that, here we are. People are saying like, I wish I hadn't have done that.
Yeah. And
Because does it really matter? Like, does it really matter if it happens at 9 p.m. tonight or if it happens tomorrow?
well, adding on to what you just said, Mary, you're like, if you unplugged at 5, realistically, probably everything would be okay most of the time. I would say probably like 98% of the time. Everything would be okay if you unplugged at 5, and you would probably be a way better employee, so much more productive, so much more focused. You probably get way more shit done in your hours of 9 to 5 or whatever you like to work. For me personally, I like to do like a 10 to 4. But like you get so much more done on the days that I actually shut everything off. And oh, I'm getting hyped thinking about it because it's like almost 4 o'clock and I'm totally gonna embody this today. You shut like on the days that I shut down everything at 4 o'clock, even if there are still things on my to-do list or my to manifest list, the days I shut it off and I go live my life without my work and without technology, and the days that I go do me after 4 o'clock, I am so much more powerful in my career the next day. Like
Yep.
so much more powerful. I show up more, I have more focus, I have more motivation, I'm able to get shit done. And I know everybody's the same way. Because if you're not putting energy into you, you're just putting it out, you're feeling depleted, you're feeling fogged in the brain, you're feeling unfocused, like all the things. So it's almost
Yep.
contradictory to like work your life away because you actually could work way less, have a more fulfilling life, and be able to show up better.
Well, and I think too, we create this false sense of security around overworking ourselves.
Mhm.
Like if I make myself so valuable because I just overwork and overwork and overwork and overwork, they'll never want to get rid of me, or like there's no way that this could fail, or like nothing bad could happen.
Yeah.
And again, don't want to be like doom and gloom over here, but that also not a true statement. Anybody who's working is replaceable.
Yeah.
Anyone who's working.
Well,
And I've said that to Jake before too, where I'm like,
yeah.
if you got hit by a bus, like guess what? Someone else would jump in and figure it out. Like you're putting all this stress and pressure on yourself. Like it
Yeah.
all is on your back and you're holding all of this weight and all this pressure, and it sucks and it's stressing you out and it's making you lose sleep and it's not healthy. And it's just fake. Like it's made up in our mind.
It is. And even Mary, everybody has like a taste of this because you could be working your ass off for somebody else thinking, oh, but if I work really hard and I prove myself, then they're never going to get rid of me. And I'm going to have a secure spot here and I'm going to move up. And then all of a sudden, boom, a pandemic hits the world and you're out.
And it doesn't like that is a perfect example. It doesn't even need to be a pandemic.
Right.
I know someone, I will not give many details, who worked at a place for like over 30 years, top in her department, and literally were paying her too much money. So they fired her and hired someone younger and newer.
Oh.
What? Like it happens. And again, I'm not, I feel like this is a very negative kind of way of talking about this. So I'm not meaning to scare anyone. Obviously, you can build value at any job. And mind you, this was me. Like these were the things that I was thinking in my head. Like,
Mhm.
I need to do this stuff. I want to do the very best I can. Like, I'm not saying hard work or like putting in your best effort is a bad thing,
Mhm.
but be mindful that we can sometimes get in our own head that like I need to work harder, I need to work harder, I need to produce more, when you might do that but you might be missing out on. So like that's kind of my last point is like you can put in the effort to a job but don't let it take away from your other priorities.
Yeah.
So another example that I want to share is it's like a store, an internet story. I don't know what you would call this. Am I having baby brain right now? Where it's like a story that I heard on the internet.
Okay. Sure.
Anyway,
Go with internet story.
so this person is juggling balls. Like we are juggling balls, right? Okay. And some of the balls are made of glass and some of the balls are made of rubber. So they bounce. And you need to be mindful of which balls are glass and which ones are rubber. I feel like if I say balls one more time, it's going to get weird. Because, so for example, work is a rubber ball. Work, if you were to drop the ball at work, oh, there you go, drop the ball at work, it'll eventually bounce back and you'll be
Yeah.
fine.
Yep.
But other balls like your family, you know, once in a lifetime experiences,
Yeah.
those are glass.
They
If
could kill.
you drop those, they might chip,
Yeah.
they might smudge and buff, they might shatter.
Yeah.
So be mindful of how you're juggling these and which ones are the priority that need the most care and the most attention. Because a lot of times we think work is a glass ball when it's actually a rubber one.
Wow. I have the chills throughout my entire body.
Oh,
So much truth.
yeah.
So
It's a good story. I don't know where, well, I'll tell you, my friend Michelle, actually, who listens to this podcast,
I know.
she
I love
shared
her.
it with me and she shared it with me, but it's like a YouTube video. You know what I'm talking about? It's like one of those sort of things. So
Yeah, it's so true and so good. And one more thing before we move on to the next one. So if you are struggling with this, here's my advice. And I'm saying this dead serious because you guys know how into this I am. Start studying manifestation. Start studying the fact that you are never in this alone. If you think you are, if you think that you're the only one, your mind, you and your mind, like, or if you think that's one and the same, if you think that you're the only one showing up for work and trying to get things done, you are wrong and you are closing yourself off to this portal of divine wisdom and magical power. And I'm not trying to sound woo, this shit's real. Like there's science coming out behind all of what I'm speaking. You are not in this alone. So if you are struggling with this, open up your mind and your heart. Start studying law of attraction, manifestation. Go read Christy's book called The Desire Factor. Get into this because this is the key and the solution out of that. Because if you start to study this and learn how to work with your energetics and your thoughts and your feelings to not work as much, but still be just as good of an employee or business owner or make just as much money and more, this will help you with that. Because, like, for example, if you're somebody who you're like, okay, well, I have to meet this quota by Friday and it's third or Wednesday and I have 2 days. So I have to hustle and work my ass off to meet that quota. Not necessarily. What you could do instead is open your mind and your heart and your beingness up to manifestation, learn how to use manifestation powers and manifest that quota being met easily within a couple of hours by the next morning or whatever it is. I mean, we're gonna have to do an entire episode on manifestations and law of attraction and action because
yeah.
there we can get so many. I mean, I have so many stories, you do, so many of our listeners, my clients, like we have so many stories we could share. So if you're struggling with this and working hard and feeling like in the trap of I have to work hard, dive into everything that I just suggested.
Yeah, I second all of that because the idea, which is a limiting belief of I have to work harder to make more money, is 100% a limiting belief.
Yeah.
And it was a very, very deep one, still pretty deep rooted some days in my mind. And it's one that I have to keep working through. And I think of, I forget where I read this or heard this, but they were like, if hard work equaled more money, people who work in the service industry
Yeah.
work their asses off. People who work in construction or like manual labor work their asses off. Teachers work their asses off.
Mm-hmm.
Now,
People who work in factories. My
working
dad
like
was
this is
in
hard work,
and I
and these are
worked,
not the
yeah,
highest paid people in our society.
right, totally.
It is not a direct equal.
Yeah. There are some people, so my dad's a plant manager at a factory and I've worked for him there before. And some of those people who work in that factory on the line, they work insanely long hours. And they're on their feet all day. And when I would go work in the factory, I would be exhausted every single day. They're working so hard. And like you said, it's not reflected in their pay. And so, yeah, that's proof that hard work does not necessarily equal.
Yeah.
So good.
That's a good one.
This has been such an awesome episode. And even though it's a topic that is not really talked about and can seem kind of morbid, I just know that you guys are going to get so much from this. And I want you guys to don't let this be another episode where you just like listen to it and you're like, okay. And you like kind of sort of reflect on it, really start to embody these things. And I want you to really think about these things. One other thing that I've done before, and you guys could try this too, is sometimes when I drive past cemeteries, I imagine my body in the cemetery. And
That's morbid for you, Sarah.
I know. And there's like actually a meditation you can do that you imagine yourself in a coffin. And it really helps to put all these things into perspective. So we are definitely going to have to do another episode on this because we have so many more that we can talk about. But this is already getting pretty, it's like a pretty intense episode, I feel. So
I agree. I think we'll break this one into a two-parter for you guys. So this will be part 1 to get you started, but there will be a part 2 because we still have 3 more of the top regrets of the dying to dive into, and we don't want this to just be episode overwhelm.
So let us know, you guys, what you thought about this episode and start this conversation with us. We want to know, share in the Facebook group or share on our Instagram. What are some of the regrets that you could potentially see yourself having at the end of your life if you don't shift things now? We really, really want to know. So share that with us. Make sure that you guys are following us on Instagram. If you haven't noticed, we have just kicked our Instagram up a notch and things are fire there. And Mary and I are even having so much fun like with the Instagram right now. So make sure you're following us there. It's at Her Vibe is Pretty Podcast. And we also started a YouTube page. So be
YouTube
sure
now, baby.
Oh my God, it's so fun. And you guys can like actually hang out with us. You can see us if you're watching us on YouTube right now. And I was seeing in the comments of one of our Instagram posts, it was Jessica and Kenzie were talking about how they listen to our podcast in the morning when they're getting ready. And I think it was Jessica who was like, I feel like I'm like hanging out with friends every morning. And I'm like, oh girls, now you can watch us and like actually hang with us. So check us out on YouTube, subscribe, give the podcast some support. Even when you subscribe on YouTube, you guys, just doing that little action of clicking the subscribe button is going to help this podcast get into the hands, into the ears of more humans. So we would love for you to gift us that gift of subscribing. Yes. So check us out there. Thank you guys so much for listening per usual. We love you guys so much. And we're so excited for your futures and your journeys.
Love you. Bye.
Love you. Bye.